Hey everybody, this is Jim the Historian, going to do another Ukraine analysis video. Before I start, if you can give me a like and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Links are below the video. You can find them. You're sophisticated people. All right, so we're going to do the war again. We're going to go over the fronts, the casualties, the tactics. We are going to, however, spend a little more time talking about the geostrategy. How do the Russians win? How do the Ukrainians win? And how does this war end? And hopefully soon, because the casualties are starting to get out of hand. We'll start by looking at the various theaters from south to north. Down here in Odessa still has not been assaulted. I don't expect it. The Russian Navy does not have enough ships. It does not have enough support craft to mount a major naval offensive without, the attacking forces just getting slaughtered. When you don't have sufficient support fleet, the fleet's going to take damage. You're going to lose lots of ships. Ships are expensive. They're full of cargo. They're full of troops. The Russians just lost a major cargo ship here near Berdansk to a missile hit. If you have a sufficiently sized naval task force, those kinds of missile attacks can be stopped by anti-missile systems on destroyers and things like that, which the Russians don't have. So again, I don't think anything is going to happen in Odessa. Remember, we had talked about the importance of this front here on the southern estuary of the Dnieper River. The Ukrainians have been able to launch some serious local counterattacks to push back the Russian pincers back to more of a defensible border. The kind of wandering Russian column that was all in here headed for the nuclear reactors was destroyed, and a lot of the vehicles were captured and the troops were captured. The Ukrainians are setting up a strong defensive line here. Again, we've talked about this for weeks about how important this is, holding this front here to keep them bottled up in the Crimea. No action here along the Dnieper. They're shooting at each other, but no major offensives. Again, without sufficient air cover and gunboats crossing basically it's really more of a lake at this point, where the river widens, is just absolutely death sentence to the troops that are doing that. Down here south, the lines have stabilized a bit. We were afraid that the Russians might kind of sweep up into this direction here with this black arrow and cause some mischief, which is why the Russians or the Ukrainians had set blocking positions here, behind the lines here. But the front line of the Ukrainian line of resistance has been able to hold up nice. Again, this area here with this black X is very heavily fortified. That's in the Donbass region. Again, the contested areas where, again, the Ukrainians and the Russians have trench lines that are seven lines deep. This is probably where the missile hit was fired that destroyed the Russian ship off Berdansk. Mariupol is still under siege. The city is just getting completely destroyed. The Russians are making slow progress. Eventually, they will capture it. It's not as decisive as people might think. They're basically just going to capture a ruin. It has a port which will be spiked and destroyed. Again, in these contested regions, not much movement. Don't expect much. There's local counterattacks. This area here, which had been contested, the Russians have kind of overran it. Ukrainians have pulled back. Again, there are active Ukrainian militias in these areas and partisans hitting Russian supply columns, which again is why the Russian losses keep going up. Good news here near Kharkiv. The Ukrainians have been able to stop the Russian attempt to encircle them. These Russian pincers over here have been stopped, and they're getting chopped up pretty good. Again, from flanking fire from Ukrainian positions in this area. Kharkiv itself is holding. It's being shelled. It's being bombed. The Russians have actually started launching ballistic missiles from Crimea with just conventional payloads at a lot of Ukrainian cities. There's videos of that, of the missiles being launched. That's adding to the destruction. Those things can pack a punch. They are not as effective tactically because they're designed to hit large targets like cities or factories. Up here north of Kharkiv, the Ukrainians have, this is kind of a major change, they have kind of pushed the Russian elements that were surrounding Sumy out, and they've relieved the city and pushed back to the pre-war line on the border. So that's a major advance for the Ukrainians. Further north, the western or the eastern flank of Kiev is still a complete mess. This area up here is really pretty much controlled by the Russians, but again, controlled in just the sense that there's not major Ukrainian military units up there. The Russians don't garrison the cities, they don't control the countryside. They're just kind of driving around on the roads, and they have ease of access. Again, there's going to be towns where there's partisans, where there's other irregular elements that are shooting at them. The Ukrainians have, again, followed up this counterattack that we talked about, and they've kind of widened it out here to relieve this border city up here, and again tie it into existing defense lines. These Ukrainians here are kind of surrounded, and here not really. That they're moving in and out and communicating, but this Russian offensive from the east is not doing anything. It's strung out. It's being attacked right now on three sides, from people behind them to the side. The Russian commanders don't know what to do. They can't swing south, which would be a tactical option. They can't get into Kiev. They can't go this way cross country because their tanks are too heavy to go across rural roads, and it's still so muddy, so they got to stay on the highways. To the west of Kiev, this line pretty much that has been set up on the third or fourth day of the war has held. There's been some minor gains by the Ukrainians in the northern suburbs of Kiev. Again, city is being shelled, lots of local battles, lots of regional engagements all over here, but the Russian offensive is going nowhere. Again, we've been watching for the Belarusian attack here to cut off the supply lines in the far west. Hasn't happened yet, and again, I can't tell you if it's going to happen or not. I think the Russians might get desperate enough to do it, but they are hesitant to launch major combat operations so close to NATO countries and NATO forces. NATO has doubled its battle groups in Eastern Europe. In terms of the casualties, we have 3.8 million civilians have fled. We now have 40,000 foreign fighters in the country. In fact, that's so many foreign fighters that the Ukrainians are unable to equip everyone with a weapon, so they're using about half of them as essentially rear service personnel, and only about half are fighting. Ukrainian casualties: 15,000 men have been killed, or have been wounded, captured, 5,000 killed, 300 tanks, 600 military vehicles, 120 aircraft, 9 ships, and approximately 19,000 civilian casualties. Again, we don't know the deaths. We don't know the wounded. We talked about this. It's almost impossible in an active war to determine the casualties because civilians move around so quickly. People steal each other's IDs. People use each other's IDs by accident. People are confused. It's just not very easy to determine civilian casualties. But there have been a significant number of them. Obviously, some terrible stories of large civilian mass casualties across the country. Russian casualties are skyrocketing. They've lost over 13,000 men killed, probably closer to 15,000. 45,000 men total in casualties, 500 tanks, 2,000 military vehicles, 200 aircraft, 4 ships, and 1 economy still. Again, the Russian casualties are higher on the killed side because their medical system is not as good as Ukraine's or a Western country. All the civilian hospitals in Belarus have been overrun by military wounded, and in the border parts of Russia. Now, in terms of how this happened, the Russians are more than capable and more than willing of taking another 50,000 casualties in a month. I mean, the Russian mentality and the value on life is so much lower than it is in the West. They certainly have the people. They have thousands of more tanks and military vehicles that they can use. So their ability to grind this out is much greater than Ukraine, no matter how many casualties Ukraine's focusing on. So that's really their best bet, is to just grind it out. In terms of Ukraine, they have to keep embarrassing the Russians. And what I mean by that is the Russians will take will take military casualties, but these casualties in the Russian general staff, Russian generals doing all sorts of crazy things. The Ukrainians have got to keep embarrassing the Russians. And the more they do that, there's a greater chance that Russia comes to the table because they don't want to be embarrassed anymore. But in terms of just inflicting casualties on the Russians, that's not going to work. You got to embarrass them.